The one thing that I will say about Katie is that I have seen her become more open to differing perspectives. I think that she has managed to recognize that there will be highs and lows when you are a social justice advocate or an activist in the world, that you will have your burdens, but you will also have your triumphs. And certainly in our process, our research process, we've gone through those together.
So as Dr. Lane was talking about, this really was a great time of growth for me. As an activist and as a student pursuing her research, I became more open and also more realistic. I saw the not so good parts of being an activist, the pessimistic points in my research and in my activism. But this is a crucial part in becoming an activist, knowing the ups and knowing the downs. So, really, Chapter 2, Preparing for Battle, is about equipping yourself with all of the resources and perspectives that you can. The more involved I became with the cause of child soldiering throughout my sophomore year, the more I really began to get asked questions, and I realized how little I knew about this topic because I couldn't answer a lot of these questions. Thus, the next step that's crucial for becoming an advocate is becoming an expert in the field as well. I began learning from lots of different resources with books, documentaries, articles, interviews, going to speakers on campus. All of these allowed me to gain an appreciation and understanding for identifying the multiple perspectives of an issue. I now saw that there wasn't just a good versus bad side in a conflict. I saw all of the complexities involved, both in the country and with the outside actors, who a lot of the times had competing motives and interests, most of which did not serve the African people. I saw how important it is to be full of knowledge before talking or advocating for a cause, so that you have a balanced and expansive sense of purpose. It was during this time that I discovered that the issue of child soldiering in Africa was related to a number of other issues of children's human rights violations in Africa. And I discovered my own sense, or you could say definition, of the word war. I saw war outside of the traditional meaning and defined it as the destruction or erosion of human rights, which can take many different forms. I realized I was studying now the war being waged against Africa's children. At this point, my passion had evolved and become much more distinct. My passion was to become a foot soldier fighting for these children. I had to know the issues inside and out and identify the different forms of war being used against Africa's children. I studied many different kinds, including child trafficking, child labor, child abuse, diseases affecting children, child soldiering, orphans, and the list goes on, as you know that there are many different forms of human rights violations that affect children. While I could have gone through all of my research, this documentary is only going to focus on 2 of these forms of war or issues affecting children in Africa.
We have a huge number of fetal alcohol children, a huge number. And in fact, we've got one little boy who it's only the fetal alcohol, the doctors think, that have made him the way he is. And his whole body is crooked and twisted, and he's got a heart problem, but it's not that serious. But he can't walk properly, he can't speak properly, he just copies everything you say. He's now 13, and he's not developing like a normal 13-year-old boy either. So, and that is the fetal alcohol. And we've got a lot of little toddlers coming in with fetal alcohol syndrome. Our first HIV positive baby that came in had fetal alcohol syndrome, TB, marasmus, that's a severe malnutrition, he was born with it. Wow. Congenital syphilis, and at the time he had pneumonia, and and HIV.
Even if they do talk about it, some people don't believe it. So we don't really like have this, like you have, I think you have in America, professional help, like therapists. For us people living in the town, function. That is very expensive. So
Right.
yeah.
Generally speaking, when children are neglected, some kind of physical abuse happens. We have a case, and then obviously it remains, anonymous, but it was a neglect plus physical abuse. So the mother was neglecting the children, not feeding the children, not taking care of the children, but she was also chaining the children to the bed because she felt that they were too out of hand. So in order to restrain them, she would tie them to the bed. That kind of physical abuse, But it was also coupled, like I said, with not taking care of them. That I know that at some point she poured boiling water on one of the children because she just felt okay, he was really out of hand.
Wow.
So that kind of physical abuse.
A child that has been sexually abused, not only that interfere with their psychological side of their being, but with their emotional side of being, because they easily lose their self-esteem. That child, that youth, that life within that young person actually deteriorates, because now they don't see themselves as as positive, and so sometimes they feel sorry for themselves. Sometimes they don't like themselves. They hate themselves. So I think that it's important for all role players, to play a role in terms of protecting young children, especially children. They're losing their parents. A child with no parent is like a bird that's trying to fly with no wings, which is a sad thing. Children are highly affected, because they get left behind,
It's absolutely devastated families. It's broken the family units for the children, and already because of poverty and unemployment, malnutrition, already those family bonds were threatened. They were really hanging by a thread, and it's completely, really devastated these children. And the saddest thing is that those children who are not HIV positive, but who have seen their parents die, who've seen the siblings die, they are now trying to run their households in many areas, and they're not being able to go to school, they're being deprived of their childhood. Some of them are being abused physically, sexually, emotionally, by the community, by neighbours, by other family relatives. And they've just got no childhood left, and their whole lives are just kind of destroyed for them.
I'm looking at HIV and AIDS. Now, young people will involve themselves with elderly people or people at the parent age or older people than themselves for money, which you call coercion sex or transactional sex. Right. Now, what happened is that now these young people then involve themselves with these people, they're getting money. In the process, they're getting money and they're getting HIV. Not only HIV, but they're also looking at teenage pregnancy or early fatherhood or motherhood parenting. Unnecessary at that particular time. Why? Because of the lack of resources, which is finance and the standard of living.
Well, it's all these diseases of poverty, malnutrition, malnutrition, TB, even if it's not connected to HIV, TB is a major, major problem. Loads of children coming in with TB. And of course many of those do happen to have HIV as well. We find out later if the TB doesn't respond to treatment. And just generally failure to thrive, mainly the malnutrition, the diarrhea disease, because of they don't always have clean running water, and maybe parents have been rummaging around looking for food that's old, and it's already been discarded by somebody else.